We now have achieved over 750,000 customers who are using Presto, and that includes 175,000 customers in the Ottawa area. So a lot of work by the Presto team to continue to get that new fair media out to our customers, and it continues to be taken up at a very, very high rate. Those are just a few examples of a couple hundred projects and initiatives that are underway, and continue to demonstrate progress in achieving the big move and improving transit choices. So that just gives a bit of an overview. And with that, Chair, I'll give the floor back to you.
And I'm going to start by asking, are there any questions of our President on any matter that isn't otherwise on the agenda or that we haven't discussed in our earlier session?
It's not a question, it's just a comment in Ms. Epper's absence. She thanks you on behalf of the Durham people for that parking facility. She was quite happy about that.
Yes, Ms. Ecker is out of the country this week and unable to be with us. Anybody else have anything they want to raise? I see none, which brings us to Mr. Mutton with his report of the Customer Service Committee.
Thank you, Chair. The Customer Service Committee yesterday met for an extensive meeting, full attendance. Our topics included a capacity constraint discussion. An update on GO Transit peak period capacity improvements was presented to us and included many ongoing projects to handle the increase in ridership demand. Strategies in place to add capacity and improve service include 13 new trips across 4 lines that were added in 2013, increased train capacity with 12-car trains with the focus on the trips with the greatest crowding, and new and more frequent off-peak services. The new 30-minute service on the Lakeshore line, as Bruce mentioned, has already attracted 30% more riders. Secondly, we had an update from GO's Customer Service Advisory Committee, which is chaired by our board member Richard Corso. They met last month. Members provided feedback on many key projects, including the Wi-Fi project and pilot, and the real-time bus information project, and the refreshing of online timetables. We did a very thorough review of the ongoing incident review of the July 8th flash flood. As we know, that day a massive storm dropped 126 millimeters of rain on the Toronto area, causing blackout, serious commuting, and this serious commuting incident. Despite the issues, GO Transit received as many commendations for the recovery effort as they did complaints. The review will look at several areas of concern. These include identifying high-risk areas, improving customer messaging systems, and upgrading the early warning storm warnings. We discussed communications. Communication with the public and our customers is extremely important to Metrolinx as we work to tackle congestion and oversee the largest transit investment in North America, a $16 billion investment. Consulting with people across the 5th largest and fastest growing urban region in North America is a huge task. The GTHA is home to 7 million people. We are enhancing communications with our GO customers in the areas of service expansion, schedule changes, as well as improvements being made through our numerous construction projects. We continue to expand our communications with our Presto customers, with over 750,000 card users and the tremendous growth in new customers. We are improving our communications about new enhancements and marketing the availability of the Presto card. The Eglinton, Crosstown and Georgetown South are some of the largest transit projects underway, and we're committed to keep the local community informed of construction progress. That is our report from this meeting.
Questions to Mr. Mutton?
Quick comment, perhaps?
Please.
The flash flood, funny as it is, we have some family members who emigrated here from the UK about a year ago, and they were planning a train ride, they weren't planning a boat ride, but at the end of the day, And I think the response was very complimentary on it. I think it was a scary experience for the family, but at the end it turned out very well. So I know that we're going to learn a lot from it, but how we did in fact respond to that was pretty good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Francis?
I just wondered if you could go a little bit deeper in terms of some of the recommendations. And I'm not talking now about sort of the safety technical sides of things. I know that we'll receive more information on that as time goes on. But from a customer service perspective, these things are interrelated. So what were some of the concrete recommendations that will be followed up at this point in time? And there's some others that perhaps more study is needed, or?
Yeah, the study is underway. We already know about 40 odd recommendations that are coming out. There's more to be considered. Just some of the obvious ones are communications. The train, because it was underwater, lost power and the batteries gave up. So Metrolinx staff were walking up and down the train on a constant basis, updating everybody and staying in touch with anybody who had health difficulties or other issues. But it was a very, very unusual situation. I think a lot of the recommendations will come concerning earlier warning about the potential of these things happening. And it's not just flooding, there are other things too. So the review is comprehensive, it's going to cover a number of issues. And I'm quite encouraged that we'll be able to use the learnings from this incident in many different ways.
And what's the time frame again for the final set of recommendations?
It's underway. We're hoping to hear something finalized in the later fall.
Okay.
Will the review also give an idea of the cost for the corrective actions?
I'm sorry, Howard.
Will the review also give an idea of the costs to be incurred for the corrective actions?
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't considered that, but yes, we'll ask for that.
Anything else to Nick? Thank you, Nick. It remains the most popular committee from Metrolinx. Your distinguished leadership. That brings us to item number 17 on the agenda, which is the Big Move Baseline Monitoring Report. I call this the Steve Monroe Tribute Report, giving you almost as much data as you would ever want if we get this right. So this is for you, Steve, that Leslie has developed this proposal. Leslie?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the time. This is a report which has evolved and really sets out to address the actions that are established in the Big Move. There are 92 priority actions that are need to be implemented not only by Metrolinx but many of our partners and stakeholders. So what the work has been over the last 2.5 years is to establish the baseline of key performance indicators by which we will continue to regularly monitor the Big Move, and to also demonstrate by publishing this publicly our principles of transparency and public accountability as we set out in the investment strategy. How will the document be used? The document will primarily be used by ourselves in setting our strategic directions and monitoring, informing our ongoing public progress reporting, and as well as assisting municipalities and local transit agencies, operators and other stakeholders on a number of other public decision making. It's also a benchmark document that will be foundational to our required legislative review that has to be completed by 2016. And as well, professionals, the general public will have access to this document online. I mentioned that this was established over a 2.5-year period. There were numerous stakeholders that are listed, many of whom are volunteers from diverse interest groups, and they're listed in the appendices of the report. There are also numerous municipal officials who were part of this over the 2.5 years, trying to gather the data, reconcile, so we're making sure we're comparing apples and apples in terms of how the data was collected and what's represented. As well as we, in addition, had a third-party peer review of the document and the KPIs in particular to ensure that we were applying a high degree of rigor to our report monitoring. While the KPIs themselves tend to be fairly technical, we group them to ask sort of the straightforward questions that most people want to know about the status of progress on the big move itself. So how are we moving around the region itself? What is the degree of choice that residents have in the region? How do people live and work? How are more people being able to live and work closer to fast and reliable transit? Are we providing alternatives for those who need them the most? And the range of other questions that are listed here. And their corresponding more quantitative performance indicator. So what is it telling us at this point? Well, we know that over 16 billion has already been committed to the first wave projects. What we know as well is that the integration of GO and the local transit fare payment with Presto is progressing well. There is a marked improvement in the integration of land use and transportation in all planning efforts, not just in terms of our projects ourselves, but with our partners in the municipalities. The introduction of the hub guidelines has dominoed into municipalities developing transit supportive land use guidelines based on those. And of course, the investment strategy has begun to, was put forward by this board more recently. What is under development are things such as the service and fare integration region-wide, more common reporting on things like customer service standards. Those are under development. There is quite a lot of planning underway for the next wave of projects, so we are in a constant state of readiness. And of course, the development for the allocation of the 25% that's set out in the investment strategy is also under development. I think at the last board meeting I highlighted a lot of the progress that's made on the rapid transit network, so I'm not sure I'm going to repeat that here, albeit to say that between 2008 and now considerable work has been underway. Of course, I'll re-highlight the investment strategy, which this board put in place as recommendations to the province. We know Presto, and that has been reported as well, on the breadth of which it has expanded, and we have successfully established an urban freight industry roundtable that meets regularly to advance the key items in improving our ability to have a better urban freight system within the region. I mentioned there were a number of key stakeholders involved in this. There was a multidisciplinary project committee that was co-chaired with Pamela Robinson and Henry Oczynski. The committee itself wanted to offer this advice in their closing meeting, which is that the importance of regular progress reporting on the plan should be an important priority of the board as it builds in accountability and public confidence in what we are doing here. That they felt that the baseline monitoring report needed to be built upon to make sure that we always have the best available data and we are constantly reassessing our KPIs. And also that the data itself, while very technical, we should be constantly looking for ways to creatively communicate sometimes very complex information. And of course, they requested for sure that the report be posted online for the general public. So at this point, I'm asking the board to receive the report and request that the President and CEO formally thank the project committee and other working groups for their contributions.
Is someone, let me see if there are any questions, then I'll seek a mover and a seconder of the report. Are there any questions for Leslie? This is great stuff you're doing, Leslie. No. I have Bonnie, then Francis.
Just one question about the baseline measure, Mr. Chair, and to Leslie. There is one indicator that is identified around are we safer as we travel? Mm-hmm. And the indicator is road safety. Am I missing something? Is there another safety indicator that relates not just to road safety, but other types of safety that's monitored and tracked somewhere else?
Yeah, so we, in choosing, there are many dimensions to safety, I agree. The committees and the working groups selected road safety as the indicator that they thought was most representative because there's a lot of transit that travels on roads. Of course, cars travel on roads, our buses are on roads, bicycles, cyclists are on roads, pedestrians are on roads. So we use that as a measure. There are obviously lots of other measures on safety, regarding perception of safety in buildings and so forth. But it was decided that this was one that touched on all the touch points of the goals and objectives of the big move. So that's the key one that we're monitoring right now.
I said, it was Francis, right?
Leslie, thank you. I know a lot of work went into the development of these baseline measures and the KPIs, and a lot of input from folks. As our work here at the board table has developed, though, and in working with leaders in the organization, two other issues seem to have sort of surfaced and become part of our approach, and that is ensuring that there are community benefits as we go forward with the big move, and ensuring that there's a commitment to design excellence. Marianne, you don't have to raise it.
Thank you.
Next time you can raise community benefits for me.
Thank you.
And it's not captured, and and I recognize that this is more laterally that we have invested more thought leadership into this, and I just wonder how we can capture ongoing progress on those measures in some way.
So the intent is that we are regularly updating both the review of the KPIs as well as the baseline. Well, this is the baseline, so we can build from there. But without a doubt, I see no difficulty in adding the community benefits or the design excellence in how we measure. So it's just a matter of making sure the data exists by which we could measure. A lot of the KPIs that didn't make it onto the list at this point, they may later, is because the data actually didn't exist that we could track. So some of the measures that you don't see on there that were not included, we are in the process, because some of them are important, it's just of now creating and collecting data in order that we can track.
And that's one of the reasons I raised it. Like for community benefits, for example, we were so much at the beginning of that process. Thinking about what would be relevant data to collect is important now as we work with the community around that.
Yeah, well, I think that I'm more than happy to make sure that's addressed.
Richard?
Yeah, so this may fall into your data piece or the lack of data piece on the goods movement side in terms of how we're measuring that as well. So you may already have had that on your list, I'm not sure, but somewhere along the line we should start to making sure we're
Yes, on the urban freight is more around the data we didn't have, and in fact our partnership that we've initiated with the University of Toronto, the core of that is to begin to collect the data. So we're well on our way with the University of Toronto in their freight center to do that. A lot of it was trying to establish the surveys, what are the correct pieces of data, who to seek out the data from. So we're in that stage now with urban freight. So it is one of the ones that we have sitting there waiting to be collected.
Okay, thank you.
Richard, will you move this resolution? Francis, will you second this? Does anybody wish to discuss it further? All in favor? Any opposed? Good work, Leslie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to Leslie Wu again, as usual. Gets the most issues on the agenda, reflecting the most work. Mobility Hubs update. Leslie.
Thank you. I will be brief on this item. It's really giving you a scan of the work since the inception of the Mobility Hubs guideline in 2011. As many of you may or may not know, the core goal and objective of the concept of Mobility Hubs is to improve the integration between our transportation investments and planning for transportation and the land uses in and around, generally in about 800 meters around our key stations. In the plan, the big move, we identified 51 mobility hubs, and the yellow dots represent the sites where we're actively undertaking integrated land use planning and transportation with the local municipalities. So a lot of work has been underway, both in on-go stations. We've been quite aggressive in the mobility hub planning in and around our go stations, as well as some other stations and hubs. The mobility hub piece has a very strong correlation with design excellence. It's one of the core tenets in our guidelines, and with the inception of the Design Excellence Initiative, we have now converged in ensuring that the design excellence review of all our hub planning and development work is well in place, and that's been critical in moving the guidelines down into implementation, into the actual what is being produced on the ground. So very quickly, just to give you a quick scan, one of our major hubs that's under reconstruction is the Dundas West Bloor Mobility Hub. This will be the convergence of the TTC subway, TTC buses, the GO Rail, and the Up Express. This station is being completely redesigned in terms of it's a dramatic transformation between what it is now on the left and where we are heading on the right for completion in 2014. Another key mobility hub is the Cooksville station. This is located. This doesn't work. Here, Ontario is the road on the right of the top image. And the very top of the photo on the top is where the Milton corridor runs, where our station is located. With the City of Mississauga, we have done a comprehensive planning exercise identifying the potential location of future parking, a future GO station, mixed-use redevelopment, public open space, the introduction of more pedestrian-scaled, human-scaled streets, and the city is now moving forward in their secondary planning, and we are also in discussion with them on a business case development for redevelopment of that site. Port Credit is a similar situation where we are looking, the top of the photograph is the rail corridor and the road running north-south, up and down. That is also the bottom of Huron, Ontario. And our station is more or less near where you see the open parking lot on the left. We have looked at the site for the development potential, as well as the integration of more parking, making it more accessible and walkable in the transition between the future Huron, Ontario LRT and the GO station. And that's progressing quite well with the community as well. Midtown Oakville is a very ambitious mobility hub, and we are proud to be working very closely with the town of Oakville. It's been a very good working relationship. We are building on their planning work that predates the hub and looking at how we can expand our facilities for GO, introduce and integrate the town's own ambition to have an intermodal bus terminal, as well as relocating their town hall and civic center closer to the Oakville Center, and with also a degree of commercial office space. And as we recently, PwC recently opened its headquarters very close to the station, partly well supported by the planning that was put in place with the town and ourselves. Eglinton Mount Dennis, which is at the westernmost edge of the crosstown, is another one of our key mobility hubs. It is the convergence of numerous things, including the LRT itself. The GO rail passes by here, the potential for a future GO station, and as well a major Toronto TTC bus terminal. It is also the confluence of one of the city's community centers on one side, and of course the maintenance facility. And this is a very complex site with huge changes in elevation, a natural river system on the edge that's governed and overseen by the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. So it's been quite an extensive and ongoing planning process. Kennedy Station is the eastern terminus of this portion of the LRT, and has a lot of potential in where and how we can develop, because a lot of this land is in public ownership, and the future bus terminal and station is also part of the ongoing planning there. At the Hamilton, the new, what's referred to as the James Street North Station, or near to the Leuna site, is one of our new stations that will have a new urban plaza. It has the potential to revitalize this northern part of Hamilton. And the City of Hamilton and the local neighborhood have been quite engaged in numerous public discussions and consultations on this site. We've introduced our guidelines to over 425 municipal leaders and officials. We've hosted 15 workshops on the guidelines, and of course, as you know, the guidelines themselves have been given a number of accolades and awards by Canadian Institute for Planning, the ITE, the International Transportation Society, and as well the OPPI. There are a number of other hub projects underway. We maintain online publicly accessible profiles of all the hubs that identifies what the site contains now, the type of traffic and number of people that live in the neighborhood, in and around, the kind of trips that are coming in and out and are projected to come in and out of these hubs. And that's one of the basis for our work. There are some stations that are not technically mobility hubs where we have applied the notion of a more transit-oriented development at this. This includes the Weston GO Station, Bronte GO Station, Clarkson, Allendale Waterfront, and the future Caledonia Station. And that's the end of my overview.
Excellent work, Leslie.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's a lot of progress. Doing great. That's exciting. Whoa.
Quick question. Leslie, this is one of the more exciting parts of what we're doing, because you get to see it all come together. It's really exciting. But if you had to point to some place around the world that's doing this mobility hub piece that kind of guides the overall vision of this, that you think they're doing it just perfectly, or as well as possible, where would you be pointing?
So there are a number of places that are doing hubs at the scale of what I would call like a Union Station or a our airport hub at that scale. So for example, in Denver right now, a massive adjustment of their Central State train station, the revitalization in Washington of their Grand Central. New York Central. So there's work happening at that scale. Where there's not as much work happening, and the more difficult work is at the small and medium scale, not in highly dense urban centers, but in what I call emerging centers or more suburban centers. And this is where the hub work is actually at the forefront, because we are trying to address the notion of transit-oriented development, not only in what more traditional hubs, but sort of what I refer to as these kind of emergent hubs.
So do you see us as a leader on that when we get outside the core?
I always see us as a leader, yes, definitely. We have been asked to present our work on numerous venues and occasions. There's a lot of interest in what we are doing.
Other questions to Leslie? Stephen?
So what are the challenges that we face in getting municipalities or local authorities get outside? Are they thrilled to hear from you? Are they willing to provide the appropriate rezoning and if necessary, in planning?
I think so generally speaking, municipalities have been very receptive. Many of them have adopted, even using guidelines. Sometimes we don't even have to go to those meetings. They're using the guidelines as a mechanism for doing their own planning, which is very encouraging. I think the challenges, so in terms of working relationship with the municipalities, I think that is going very well. It becomes more and more difficult because, of course, we're not necessarily the implementers of everything. It becomes more and more difficult for them when we have to get down to the nuts and bolts of the actual investment they have to make. So, for example, in Mississauga, there is a new right-of-way that we have to introduce. So they have to anticipate in their budgeting to ensure that they have the EAs, they have money for the EAs and so forth, so the timing and sequencing works with our timing and sequencing. So that's where the challenges occur.
But do they, if we were putting the mobility hub in, do we go so far as to recommend certain densities, or the planning departments in those areas come up with their own densities? Or
we work very collaboratively together, so we undertake some real estate analysis. Some of the studies are jointly funded. In the case of Mississauga, we jointly funded those hub studies. And the results of that, which include not just the planning aspect, but the real estate potential, they are now looking to their economic development folks in the city of Mississauga of how they can leverage this. So, but it varies from municipality to municipality. And for some municipalities, this is very new in the approach.
Mary Ann?
Can I ask a point of clarification? You say the status of studies of mobility hubs, 2 are on the Eglinton Crosstown under construction.
Mm-hmm.
The under construction refers to Eglinton Crosstown, not the
not the mobility
Yes,
hubs. You
correct.
refer to
Yes,
the
sorry,
Beth
that-
Dennis and
That,
Kennedy.
it's the Eglinton Crosstown that is under construction.
Yeah, so on those other ones, are you applying these principles of design excellence to those, that they haven't been procured yet, those
That's
stations?
correct.
So
Yeah.
the studies are related to?
Yes, so the studies, because they're at the macro level, set the context, and then the design excellence review happens at the next level down, when they're starting to look at built form or urban design and landscape. So it has been part of the work with Crosstown.
And that will all go into the procurement
Yes,
document
yes,
when they?
yeah.
that-
The hub study is a reference document that's
Right.
given to competitors for the work, not just in Crosstown, in other projects as well.
Across that,
Yeah.
across that whole Eglinton
Yeah.
crosstown system, and then branching out to other aspects of.
Yeah, well, and on the GO side as well, we
On the GO side.
apply the GO Mobility Hub guidelines as a guiding document for the work that's happening.
So what do you think the soonest date we will begin to see the products of that design excellence? Because I think much of transit has been driven by very competent engineering, but that idea of bringing design excellence to that engineering studies, when do you think is soonest? Because there obviously are a number of pipeline projects that have to go through. It doesn't make sense to relook at things, but to
So it's
have a kind of continuous.
a somewhat difficult question for me to answer. It's all aligned when the timelines of the various projects. And from the moment in February of this year when we initiated, as many projects as we could humanly run through the filter ran through the filter. And some of them are now only in very early stages. Some will be taking, some have longer construction times. I can, working with Greg and Jack, come back if you want to know the status.
In terms of the kind of public perception, the Eglinton Crosstown will be a kind of the kind of.
Well, I think even
singular
before that, I
project.
would say on the Georgetown line with the Up Express.
The Up Express.
Yeah.
Actually, that predates this, but.
Yeah, but
it
it
had
went
its
through,
own-
we still, discussed it, and there was fine tuning that we were able to do on that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Leslie, that's really good. There's no action required by the
No.
board, it's for information, but very, very good work and encouraging, and thank you for the update. The next item on the agenda is Leslie Wu.
Promise it's my last.
This one's really interesting. This is the Relief Line Network Study Update, and we look forward to this item. Leslie, please take the lead.
Thank you very much. And this is really an update on where we are relative to advancing our understanding of what the Relief Line means, not just for downtown Toronto, but for the whole region. So the focus of the study is really on capacity relief, not, as I mentioned, not locally and regionally. We know that the Yonge Subway is the busiest rapid transit in the GTHA, and GO train service is currently operating at capacity. So on all throughout the network, we have serious capacity issues. And there is in fact work underway to address this issue of capacity. The core to this study asks two fundamental questions. What is the full range of alternatives that need to be considered relative to addressing capacity? And how can GO Transit and other transit operators and their service, long and short distance, impact it more effectively? And what is the optimal phasing of related projects? So when you think about our network, we have numerous projects coming into play at various times. The sequencing of those does impact at what point in time the volume and degree of capacity that needs to be addressed. So there are a lot of players involved in this effort, not just ourselves. We are working very closely with the TTC, the City of Toronto planning folks, and the region of York. And we hope to advance our very preliminary consultation this fall, and further more detailed consultation next summer, with some preliminary study findings in the spring. Why is this a pressing issue? I mentioned about, we all know how busy the Yonge Subway is, and of course the fact that Yonge and Bloor is a major pinch point. There are also parallel challenges in other parts of the network. GO train service to and from Union is currently operating at capacity in the peak periods. So it's a cumulative issue. And the capacity relief has wide impacts. So most of Toronto transit trips use the subway network. Congestion on one part of the system has impacts felt. So this is the butterfly effect of the trips that are taken. York Region residents make extensive use of the subway network itself for long-distance trips. And of course, if we don't address this capacity issue, the congestion has the potential to negatively affect the customer experience, our ridership growth throughout the region, and particularly into downtown. And as we know, modal shift is one of the key objectives of the big move. And as well, of course, there's a high interdependency between all these different modes of transit. There is already underway some funded capacity improvements. The Toronto Rocket trains, there is some in service and full service in 2014. The introduction of automatic train control by 2016 in the TTC. And Metrolinx has provided $293 million in funding in quick wing programs to address capacity issues throughout the region and on the subway. With all this in place, we have the ability to increase subway capacity from 26,000 passengers per hour to 38,000 passengers per hour. And as well, the extension of the University subway line, University Spadina subway line, will attract more riders away from the Yonge line at its inception. It's in service in 2016. However, even with the current improvements, the subway will still be at capacity by the time the term of our plan, which is 2031. And one of the key constraints is the intersection at Bloor and Yonge. So the study is going to look at the region as a whole, at the network as a whole, and explore a full range of alternatives. It will look at land use and development benefits of different alternatives. We know that a relief line could alleviate the Yonge subway, but we also need to understand what it could do with respect to Union Station capacity and our GO Transit service capacity, and what would be the phasing of introducing these improvements. So the way the study process is set out, we are going to spend some time in the problem definition, look at a wide range of alternatives that will be, based on our evaluation criteria, be reduced as the study progresses, and then proceed to put forward some recommendations. There are a number of parallel pieces of work that are underway in addition to our own work. That includes the City of Toronto's Feeling Congested, the official plan review, and specifically with regards to the work they're doing on transit. And as well, the TTC is undertaking its phase 2 of the Downtown Rapid Transit Expansion Study with a preliminary deep dive route evaluation that will be an important input into our study as well. We hope that the study will recommend a package of solutions to addressing crowding and pinch points. It will begin to identify a rational sequencing of projects and programs for capacity relief. It will support improved access for key destinations, and better integrate, look at how we can better integrate local and regional transit service. We have already gone through a competitive procurement process. The contract for the study has been awarded to Steer Davies Gleave most recently. We are refining our consultation plan, the public consultation timing I mentioned earlier. We hope to report to the board on the preliminary findings in the spring, and public consultation on draft study recommendations towards the end of next year. I won't share the appendices. So that's the overview of where we are, and I do want to thank our partners at the TTC and the City of Toronto and York Region for their ongoing collaboration, because it is it's a piece of work that has to be well meshed together.
And just on that, are our partners in agreement with all of this as to how we're approaching it, the form of public consultation, the consultants, all of that? Like, if we were hearing a presentation up in York, or we're hearing from TTC, would they be saying essentially the same thing and with the same enthusiasm you are?
The answer is yes, and in fact this deck is the basis of a deck that we collaborated on because they themselves have to speak to their governance bodies about what this project is, and so we developed this together. So it has been a very collaborative effort.
That's terrific. And is there a steering committee or some kind of governance over this?
Yes,
that keeps us all together?
There are numerous committees. There is what I call more of an executive committee that is that works at the level. Bruce sits on it, Andy Byford and Joe Panachetti and John Libby from the city. We have
And is there someone from York in that?
and York Region is part of. There's also another working group that includes York Region as well as a number of other technical working groups. And as well, we will have a multi-stakeholder steering committee also advising us.
You're not asking us to do anything
No,
at
I'm
this
just
stage. This is for information, but if anybody had anything they wanted to supplement this or had concerns about the direction, this would be the time to express them. But this is staff work that's ongoing in partnership with our partners on this. So, but it's a time to speak up if there's anything missing. I did share with you some correspondence I received about greater use of Go.
Yes.
And
That's
can I assure those correspondents that that's shared with our partners and you're taking those ideas seriously?
Yes, it'll be important input into our considerations.
Can you remind us which group it was that wrote?
It's called, sorry.
Because I promised to make sure that I wrote to you and I promised to make sure it was noted.
Transportation Action Ontario.
Right.
Leslie, at the end of the day, do you anticipate with the sort of coordinated governance looking at this project that there will be a set of recommendations that will have buy-in from all of the partners? I mean, whether it's a relief line that is a TTC asset or enhancement to Go, that there would be a common view brought forward?
That is the goal. That is the core goal of doing this. I don't think we can. We want to find. We want the study to recommend something that can move into implementation, and you can only do that if we have all our partners with us. So it will be founded on strong evidence and good analysis, and we will have those folks with us along the way. So as much as possible, that is the ambition.
So just help me understand then, the city continues with its feeling, the city of Toronto continues with its feeling congested consultations and studies, and that will feed in, but they'll also be participating in this. Is there possible conflict in that, or do you see that as helpful, or?
I guess the only conflict would have happened is if in the official plan review, for some reason, the city thought that a relief line was not needed. I think that would be a major conflict. Or if for some reason, I think that's really, I mean, you know, it will be where we may disagree maybe in the finer details of the project, but in terms of coming up with a selection of alternative, of the extent of the scope of the project itself, because the different partners have different responsibilities at different scales, we're hoping that we can set the table for to address capacity or relief, the portions of which the different bodies have responsibility. It will all fit together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Joseph.
Yeah, just a quick question. So do you start from the position that a relief line is a requirement, or do we say that we need to solve the congestion problem, and therefore what are the alternatives? I mean, it sounds to me like you've already made up your mind that you've got to have a relief line, and that it's a subway. That's what I'm hearing.
No, I think the going in premise is that we have a capacity problem. There in the plan, the big move, we identified a subway. Yes, we did identify a subway corridor to address it. We now know more about because there's been a lot more study done on this idea of a relief line. So we now want to take a more comprehensive view in terms of defining the extent of the line. So it was this piece of the network has always been looked at specifically about downtown relief. And now we want to say we have the ability to use this investment, given our work on the Union 2031 study, to address regional-wide capacity issues, Union Station capacity issues. So we're now going to integrate those pieces and reevaluate what are the best alternatives to this. So do we need relief in the region? Yes. Is it one line? Is it a short, medium, or long line? Like that's the part that we're going to grapple with. Like how far does it go? How far do you need? And in what sequence should we be introducing it?
So there's a goal solution in here somewhere.
There's a what?
Goal.
But that's what we want to explore carefully. Can we address some of the goal capacity issues simultaneously?
Other questions? Leslie, that's an impressive 3 reports.
Thank you very much.
I know you got a
Have a
good
great
team.
team,
You've got
yes.
a really good team. And I
Terrific
know
team.
you're always giving them credit, and it's richly deserved here. This is really 3 excellent reports in a row.
Thank you very much.
And very nicely presented too, in
Thank
terms
you.
of crispness and brevity of the reports. Very responsive to what the board asked for. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 20, which is the Community Benefits Agreement Progress Report. Jack Collins and Judy Pfeiffer. This is a matter we asked to have put on the agenda. We're grateful it is, Bruce, and we turn to you guys to present it.
Thank you, Chair. We've been meeting over the past 8 or 9 months with the Toronto Community Benefits Network, and I'd just like to acknowledge that Steve Schallhorn and John Cartwright and some of his colleagues are here. And those are the folks that we've been talking with about what community benefits are. So just briefly, what is community benefits as it pertains to some of our major public infrastructure projects that Metrolinx is involved in. So in general, typically a community benefits agreement would address how we work with communities, local and regional organizations to develop and implement strategies that take advantage of local jobs. So it's a huge investment we're making. There must be an opportunity to train and do some workforce development so that the community that is hosting these projects actually has some benefits that inure from the projects. Establish some goals for apprenticeship programs, both pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship goals, and have some system of monitoring. Are they being implemented? Are we actually seeing some improvements to apprenticeship opportunities? And support environmental sustainability and local economic development. So those kind of form the framework of what we've been discussing with the Toronto Community Benefits Network. We support the concept of a community benefits agreement on our major infrastructure projects. The board has indicated that in past discussions. We've been working with the network to develop something for the Eglinton Crosstown project and what the content of a CBA would look like for the Crosstown project. And we've identified the following areas, which I think we're in general agreement that these are the kind of things that both groups would like to achieve on this project. Commit to sponsoring pre-apprentice and apprenticeship programs, contribute to initiatives that enhance job awareness for local residents in the communities along the transit line. Those could be job fairs. The companies that win the work are hiring these kind of professionals, these kind of people, making sure that that's aligned with some of the workforce development work that we have to do in conjunction with a number of workforce development agencies. Actually require contractors to assess qualified local resources to deliver a wide range of products and services. And what are those services? Those could be anything to supplying construction fencing, equipment, supplies, anything along the alignment where some of the local businesses would benefit by supporting the construction effort during the construction years. Commit to hosting supplier fairs with the contractors. They can meet local suppliers, find out more about their capabilities, develop measures to track contractor performance, enforce contract requirements, and measure the effectiveness of the program over time. And Metrolinx would be committing to assigning a liaison from Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario and the contractor to coordinate the community benefits program. So the next steps are to actually sit down and refine these and put them into some contract language where we can actually get some kind of implementation into the contracts that we're about to put out on the Crosstown project. We're also requesting a representative from the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Apprentices, TCU it's called, to participate in the CBA development and implementation. I'm quick to tell the Toronto Community Benefits Network that While I might understand civil engineering, I'm not very good at social engineering, so I think it's important that we get some people here that have been involved in workforce development programs and have responsibility in the province for doing that. And then Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario currently are preparing these requirements. We need to review some of these requirements with our provincial counterparts, the Metrolinx board, and get some consensus on how we implement those into the crosstown RFP and also into the project agreement that ultimately is the document that you would enforce these kind of conditions on the contracting community. So those are the next steps that we're involved in, and hopefully this work will be done and the RFP will be out before the end of the year.
Thank you very much. John, do you want to say anything? John Cartwright was good enough to come and join us. I know you've been helpful here and your colleagues. Do you want to add anything to this, John?
Certainly, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I appreciated Jack's presentation. From the labour movement's perspective, we want to make sure that as this tremendously important project, the Crosstown project, develops, that we don't have young people, particularly people of colour, standing at the gate looking in and wondering why they can't get those job opportunities. So we've been working with the construction unions, the Hammerheads project, the Choice project with the Carpenters, to look at how they've been able to outreach to low-income and racialized communities and bring those people into full apprenticeship systems. And working with the contractor community as well to ensure that there'll be a mentorship program as those people come in. And this has been a feature in many major projects in North America. We brought experts in, Steve Shelburne, who heads the Community Members Network, brought experts in from LA, Vancouver, and Glasgow some time ago to get the best learnings from their experiences and what obstacles there were and what had to be overcome. So we look forward to having an actual agreement in place that is there, that our neighbors who are having a really rough time about what happens to young people in those communities can say, yes, this prosperity is truly going to be shared, and I hope that we're able to have that in place. And enforcement's a huge issue, and that's one of the other learnings, is that we need to make sure that that as the organization say, yes, we'll do that, we'll take it, that we actually have the wherewithal to ensure that that turns into reality. It's a very exciting project, and I want to thank staff of Metrolinx and the board for the support up to now, and hopefully we can conclude a great agreement that will stand the stead of time, and that many others will look at and say, that's the way to do it. We share this prosperity, we share the future careers of young people, and instead of some of the other options they've been embracing these last number of years, they can actually get into not just construction careers, we're also talking about white-collar careers and some of the engineering and others. So it's not just guys benefiting, but there's also the opportunity for people who've gone through college and university to get a career through this process as well.
Thank you for those eloquent and positive and inspirational remarks. That's really great. I don't know if you rent yourself out as a speaker, but next time I'm asked to speak, I'm going to substitute you. You can do that ad lib from the floor. That's great. We do appreciate your partnership in this, and I hope you'll keep working with Jack and the team here at Metrolinx. Francis, you were the first person to put this on our agenda. Do you want to comment?
I do. I'm very encouraged. I've had a chance to work with staff as they have been thinking about this and moving it forward, and I appreciate the kind of energy that has been put into trying to understand and move these things. And I love Jack's comment about civil engineering. I think that there's a lot of people that don't understand a lot about how to do this, and so John's comments that this is breaking new ground in Ontario is really important. It's very exciting, and we are leading the way. In that, there's a caution. In the work that I was able to do on the social assistance review, we found very clearly that TCU did not have yet a strongly developed capacity for delivering the right kinds of supports for young people at risk, and particularly marginalized communities and young black men. The programs did not reach that population, and that part of this is a holdover from the transfer from the federal government and EI programming and where the dollars went, and they are trying to change that. but they don't have a track record on that yet. And as a result, we actually made recommendations that bypassed TCU and worked with municipalities. The community sector is largely fragmented. The coalition and the network is an amazing way of bringing people together. I think the network knows that they have work to do to be able to deliver into the pipeline, to make sure that there are people who are ready to take advantage of these opportunities. But I think it's important that you bring TCU to the table. I just think that we need to be realistic to understand that we are charting some new ground, and I think the province, the government, will be pleased to see this development. I think various departments, whether it's Infrastructure Ontario, TCU, finance on procurement rules, other sorts of things, are going to have to catch up, and this is a process of bringing them along and not letting them step in and do things the same old way, because the same old way will mean that the same people that have been excluded will continue to be excluded.
I can take some more comments. I got Doug and then Howard and Rahul.
Thank you, Rob. Jack, I'm delighted to see that you're doing this. I am a strong supporter of it. I've been involved in many RFPs over the years, and I'm pleased to hear that you're going to be working with IO to build this aspect into the RFP process. I would argue that you have to instruct them to explicitly build this into their evaluation and their marking process. And if it's just an aspiration, it's not going to happen. But if it's built into the process to determine who wins and who doesn't win, then it'll put an awful lot of focus on it. The second point I'd make is I chair the foundation board at George Brown College, and I can tell you that George Brown has a fantastic trades program, and this is going to be really valuable to the grads coming out of George Brown.
I've got three more people who wish to comment. You've hit a hot spot here, Jack. I've got Howard, then Rahul, then Joseph.
Jack, I just wanted to get your opinion on the capacity for such a program. Because obviously, once you launch such a program, you're building expectations. And looking at the project, do you have any targets of how you could impact the community? And obviously, that will have to measure the resources that you need to support it. And any ideas on that?
So one of the things that we're trying to actually get some advice from the Ottawa Light Rail project, which went the Infrastructure Ontario route, is really how many jobs are created, what areas are they created in. We have different targets that we want to work with the Toronto Community Benefits Network, as far as there's construction jobs, there's engineering jobs, there's a lot of people who's come to our knowledge that they've got engineering credentials in other countries, and unless they have Ontario experience, need not apply. Well, how do they get that Ontario experience? So are there some opportunities where we can fast track some of those excellent engineers from other countries that are having a hard time getting in here, who are immigrants? That's one target area. Permanent jobs. We know that there are permanent jobs in the maintenance facility. We have an idea of how many jobs those are. And are there certain skill sets in that area that can be trained, like electromechanics, etc., that we're going to have a demand for those with electric light rail vehicles. So these are the kind of things that we're trying to dial in on. What are the jobs and how do we target that workforce development and get that workforce available to us when we need them?
Rahul and then Joe.
As vice chair of the board of George Brown College, I'd like to echo the comments of the chair of our foundation about the importance of connecting youth to opportunities. And when I think about all the work that we've been doing at Metrolinx, it's a big leap from community relations to community development, and there's a smart way to do it and a dumb way to do it. And I just got to say, I think this is a really smart way to do it, and I'm really glad to see the partners that we brought along to make this happen, and I think it's important that we continue to bring it back to the board so we can track how we progress on this. But kudos to a really good start.
Thanks, Rahul. Joseph and then Bonnie.
Yeah. Chair, when we first brought this to the attention of the board, which was some months ago, Francis, you'll remember, I was strong support of it, it still is, but I'm particularly pleased with the readiness that is being created by the Carpenters Union who have put in place a training program.
And hammerheads as well.
That's right, to ensure that there are kids in the local community, not just kids, but people who are hard to employ, who can see developments like across town and say, it's going through my neighborhood, I'd like to make sure that there are some local hirings that takes place as a result. So there's a benefit directly to the locality because of what is happening with Crosstown. So great initiative, love it, and strong supporter.
Thank you, Joe. Bonnie, as I call on you, I'd be grateful if you'd remind the board and our visitors that there's more than one educational institution, higher education institution in the city of Toronto. And if you want to give a little attention to some of the other ones, that'd be all right.
I'd be happy to do that. I appreciate Francis's commentary about the training shift between the federal and provincial government and the capacity within TCU to be able to act. But Colleges Ontario has an extraordinary capacity to reach virtually all colleges and colleges that work together in partnership with each other in their pre-apprentice and apprenticeship interface with industry. And I'd encourage you to reach out to Colleges Ontario to think about a representative that could work on the ground with all of the 24 colleges in differing ways. Secondly, there's a great model that came out of medical education in the university sector around foreign workers. And that model worked because the deans of medicine engaged very deeply in what they could do to build the talent pool that existed in community around foreign trained people in the health professions. The deans of engineering, for example, through the university sector could potentially contribute in a similar way. Look at the model, figure out the model that might work for the communities that you're working in. And I'd certainly be happy to help you connect to that affiliate that works with the Council of Ontario Universities.
Thank you. Thanks, Bonnie. Last comment on this item, Richard. How does Hamilton feel about this?
Well, okay, so Rahul, you might be able to tell me, does Toronto have a local immigration partnership council?
So that's right, yes.
Okay, so we have one in Hamilton called the Hamilton Immigration Partnership Council, but they're all across the region. And they're fairly new, probably in the last 3 or 4 years that they've formed, and I think that would be another resource, a potential partner for you to hook up with, particularly focused on the immigrant community and some of the things you've talked about, of those people coming in with credentials but unable to get work. That's a really good venue for you to tap into.
Thank you. Jack, Judy, I think you can see the level of enthusiasm for this and the congratulations on a good start, but there's a heck of a lot to be done to turn it into a reality of good jobs for people and good opportunities. So good luck with this, and thank you. Thanks for your leadership. It's strongly supported. That brings us to the quarterly reports. Just to recall our colleagues from the public, last quarter we began the practice of sharing these quarterly reports with the public. We used to do it in our private session since the beginning of the current Metrolinx. Every quarter we ask the leader of each chunk of the organization to let us know in a few pages what's happening under their responsibilities, a way of allowing all of us on the board, and now more broadly the public, to know about the progress we're making. Our practice is to see if there are any, we take them as read. There don't have to be questions on any of them, but it's an opportunity as we work through them to see if there are any questions from any member of the board on any of these quarterly reports. The first one is Union Pearson Express. Kathy's in the back. Kathy, stand up, please, in case there are any questions to Kathy. Does anybody have any questions at this stage to Kathy? I see none. That's a compliment to the clarity of the report and all the progress that's been made. Nice work, Kath. The next one is Presto. Robert, are you here? Robert's there. Are there any, we had a discussion of some Presto matters earlier. Is there anything further on Presto anybody wants to raise? Francis.
I just wanted to have a better understanding of expansion of use of Presto and the Pan Am Games and how these two things might come together or not. And am I building a linkage that isn't there, or is that?
Robert, you might jump to the microphone just in case, up here at the table, come to the table. Question is there a connection between Pan Am Games and further expansion of Presto?
Yes, I think as Leslie reported earlier on, the Pan Am Committee has looked at tying the transit option into the actual event tickets as a way to deal with movement around Toronto. But we are having some discussions at the Presto level with our transit agency partners to see whether or not there is an opportunity to provide some incentives within the Presto system itself. But those discussions are underway at the moment.
Thank you, Robert. Next is Go Transit. Gary, I see you're hiding in the back instead of sitting at the table today. Come and join us, we miss you. Are there any questions? We've had, of course, the customer service report and the like. Is there anything for Gary? Anybody got a question? Nice working. You're doing great.
It's going fantastic.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Next is policy planning innovation. Leslie, I can't believe there'll be any questions to Leslie at this stage after all those presentations already done, but there might be. Does there anybody have anything they want to raise that Leslie hasn't already spoken to?
Just a quick one.
Yeah, there is one.
It's a little unfair to put a big one out here, but it goes back to the fare and the service integration.
Yes.
And I'm picking up in your report that there's going to be specific implementation approaches around 2015. So as this whole concept moves forward, and it's really important for us around the fare and the service integration piece, what are the big issues out there that everybody's going to have to work for? What's slowing the process down?
In 2 minutes or less.
Yeah, there's nothing slowing the process down so far as us getting the work underway. But the issues will be on the funding, finance, and governance.
3 small points. Footnotes.
Those are the tough parts.
So the quick follow-up then. So what do we expect in 2015 when you say specific implementation approaches? Is that another timeline on how it's going to roll out with the model? Or?
We will want to, in doing the analysis, we not only want to lay out the long-term strategy, but what I call quick wins that may be in place that we could implement sooner rather than later. So that's what our goal is.
Thank you, Leslie. That was a great answer to a tough question. Excellent. Next is Judy Pfeiffer and Strategic Communications. Just while we're waiting to see if there's any good question, I want to do a shout out to Anne-Marie Atkins. Could you stand up, please, Anne-Marie? You do a great job. I'm always reading about what Metrolinx is doing. Every time you speak, I wish I'd said it myself. You do an amazing job for us, so congratulations. You're really outstanding at what you do on behalf of all of us. So thank you from the board. You make us look good. Does anybody have any questions to Judy?
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
Howard.
Strategic communications is as much imaging as it is utilizing radio frequency, etc. So from an imaging point of view, looking at cameras, deployments, etc., is there any plans to expand that in any other area? Greater use within Metrolinx?
I'm very sorry, I missed the start of the question.
Imaging, enhancing, increasing the use of cameras, for example, imaging to relay information to customers for security, for so many other reasons. How do you intend to expand that?
Well, right now, we're having tremendous success releasing images of our construction. So one of the things people want to see is the progress that's being made. So we're using social media to really show the progress that's being made. We're also, in terms of our customers, I'm not sure what, I'm sorry, I missed the start of the question. So
how about real-time reflection of Go Transit, throughout the GTA?
Maybe Doug wants to supplement the question.
Okay.
Well, I guess the point that I want to make is that this is such a big, complex subject. We around this table have agonized and lived this for the last 4 years. There's all kinds of noise politically, and I think it's just so important that you and your communications team is getting the right message out and is consistently delivering a message that tells taxpayers and residents of the GTHA what's being done. And I just would encourage you to look past the political noise that's going on everywhere and continue to speak clearly about what's happening, making sure media knows it, and making sure that we're going directly to the people of the region.
Okay.
And Howard, maybe if you want to continue, you can follow up with Judy offline, just to drill a little deeper on that. Thanks, Doug, for that. That brings us to the investment strategy and project evaluation. This is now Robert Siddle. has taken charge of the investment strategy and project evaluation with John Howe moving on. Are there any questions to Robert? Good start, Robert. Nice work. It won't always be that easy. That would bring us to the end of the agenda, but before ending, I want to say a few words about the Scarborough subway matter, because the board had a discussion of it earlier, and I know there's a good deal of interest in the subject, and I thought I'd just share the board's thinking on the topic based on our discussion, continuing discussions and our discussion today. Let me start with this. Metrolinx has consistently supported using the SRT corridor to bring rapid transit to the Scarborough Town Centre and linking it to Kennedy Station. The big move incorporates that idea. The Transit City Plan incorporated that idea. The 2009 funding announcement by the province incorporated that idea. The master agreement between Metrolinx and the city TTC incorporates that idea. The minister's statement last week about his commitment to the SRT corridor as being the right corridor continues that commitment that we've shown consistently over the last number of years, that that's the right corridor to get to the Scarborough Town Centre. Furthermore, that alignment, the Scarborough Town Centre, has previously been approved under the Environmental Assessment Act, albeit for the LRT project as opposed to a subway project, but that corridor has been approved. In July, following the City Council vote under which City Council expressed its preference for a subway instead of the LRT that was contemplated by the master agreement, Minister Murray came to Metrolinx and said, if we're going to have a subway, I'd like you to take another look at why we can't use the SRT corridor, because that's the corridor that we have consistently supported in our planning at every stage, and every agreement, every project announcement has supported that corridor. Please study the question and do a feasibility study as to whether we can continue to use that corridor, the SRT corridor, as the corridor for a subway, if it's to be a subway instead of the LRT. And armed with that charge, we undertook a feasibility study. And we did so, A, because we were asked to, but B, because we thought to ourselves, that would be a terrific idea if we can make it work to use the existing corridor alignment for the subway. We did do the feasibility study, and it suggests, the preliminary results suggest that the SRT corridor has a number of significant advantages to use it. It has greater opportunities for economic growth and employment along its length relative to the route previously proposed by the TTC. It takes advantage of an existing corridor instead of having to assemble and build a new corridor. Our preliminary analysis shows that it could potentially deliver a subway at lower cost using the existing alignment instead of building a new one, in part because, of course, it requires so much less tunneling in order to build it. And assuming rapid transit in some form is then at a later date extended beyond Scarborough Town Centre, this corridor would end up serving more priority neighborhoods and double the population within walking distance of the line than the alternative. We also, on the preliminary analysis, have come to the view that it should be possible to deliver a subway in the SRT corridor approximately within the $1.48 billion funding commitment from the province. So all of these factors have suggested to us at the board that using the previously approved and consistently relied upon alignment deserves the most serious consideration, because it offers for us the possibility of a better solution at a lower cost serving more people and generating more jobs and more economic growth than any other alignment. And so on its surface, based on the feasibility study, that makes it attractive as the option to pursue. Metrolinx staff met with the city and TTC officials in late August, shared with them these ideas and the feasibility study. At that time, the TTC officials understood to begin to engage that work and to begin a dialogue with us, which is continuing on the feasibility of the technical issues, on the financial estimates, and all the other considerations that bear upon the routing. As a Metrolinx board, we acknowledge the need for careful due diligence to confirm the preliminary findings of the feasibility study. We look forward to working closely with our colleagues at the TTC and the city to complete this confirmatory work, to confirm the hypothesis that this is an excellent outcome that will serve more people better at lower cost. So we will work to complete that work with the city and TTC officials, and when Bruce and his team are of the view that the work has been completed, they will bring that work to the board with a full report on that work and a recommendation for this board's consideration at that time. I should also note that ultimately the alignment, if it's to be a subway instead of the LRT, has to be subjected to an Environmental Assessment Act review before the final approval to proceed could be given. And so at this point, that's our posture. We think there's a really good idea here. We think the preliminary work indicates it's feasible and doable and the best of the best outcome. But we have serious work to do with our partners in order to conclude that and have a formal recommendation in front of this board. A question's also been raised about the question of the shutdown of the Scarborough RT during the construction of a subway on the same alignment. It is the case, of course, that if we are to build on the SRT alignment, the RT would be out of service for approximately 3 years. That's exactly the same 3 years that it would be out of service for if we build an LRT on the current alignment. And it was that 3-year period and that building on that alignment that was contemplated by the existing master agreement between the city and TTC and Metrolinx. So it's not a new idea. It is the same issue as we confronted and reached agreement on with the city and TTC in the master agreement. With respect to the cost of that that 3-year period, the current master agreement provides that Metrolinx will reimburse the TTC for the net disruption costs of that service. Would have to, if there is to be an amendment to the master agreement, would have to discuss that with the TTC, but that's what's provided for in the existing master agreement. I should also add that the city and Metrolinx are in agreement that if we were to do anything other than build the LRT on the SRT corridor, that requires an amendment to the master agreement. So the alignment and the technology requires an amendment to the master agreement, which once we land with the city, we'll work out. The last thing I just wanted to add is that we have also been actively considering bringing the Pulse bus rapid transit system from Durham to Scarborough Town Centre, making Scarborough Town Centre that much more of a priority as a regional transportation hub. We think that will help serve Scarborough, the campus of the University of Toronto, Centennial College, and other users along that line. Overall, I want to put this in context. Our objective at Metrolinx continues to be the delivery of improved transit services across the GTHA. We continue to be carrying a very large number of projects forward. We believe we're making terrific progress on things like Union Station, The Eglinton Crosstown is under construction now. We've introduced the 30-minute service on GO Lakeshore rail lines. We've got the Union Pearson Express on time, on budget, to open in the spring of 2015. We opened last month the first chunk of the York Viva Rapidway service on Highway 7. The Mississauga Transitway continues. Presto, as you know, has now reached over 750,000 customers, and I could go on and on. My only point is to keep a view as we deal with each of these individual issues on the broad agenda, which is to move forward in partnership with each of the municipalities that we serve and with the transit system, municipal transit systems with which we partner. The Scarborough case is but an example of this broader agenda of work that we do with our partners to advance transit in the GTHA. Bruce, that's my summary of the board's discussion. I'm going to give you a chance to improve on it, embroider it, change a detail, and I invite any member of the board who wants to add any comment in case I haven't put your position. I'm trying to report orally a summary of the discussion we had earlier today.
No, I think that's a very good summary. I think the important piece from my perspective is that we have been and we will continue to be working with the city and the TTC very closely as we evaluate the alternatives and in particular look through the technical, financial, staging questions and matters associated with using the existing SRT alignment for the proposed Bloor-Danforth subway extension. So we're committed to continue that engagement with the city and the TTC, and we've been meeting on a regular basis since late August on this and other matters related to the project, and we'll continue to be meeting with them on a regular basis.
And perhaps in the same spirit, I should say that we, of course, work very closely with not just the TTC and the city, but we work very closely with MTO and the minister on this on a weekly basis, working our way through these issues, trying to field excellent ideas and work with them and continue relentlessly to make progress on all of these projects in a very collaborative and positive relationship. Does any other member of the board wish to add anything, any embroidery of what I've said and what Bruce has said? Don't hesitate if there's anything you wish to say. Francis, you're looking expectant. Oh, is there something you want to say?
Surprisingly, no.
Okay, and I should perhaps add that Councillor Stintz did write to me last week about some of these issues, and I plan to send her a reply that will reflect various of the themes that I've just spoken to in the day or two ahead. Is there any other matter anybody wishes to raise at the board before I seek adjournment? I see no one. With that, we are concluded. Thank you all very, very much for coming. In terms of the media scrum we're going to do, we're actually going to use this room to save you guys having to take the cameras out and the like. So we're just going to just wait 3 or 4 minutes. People will exit, and we'll do it sitting right here. Thank you very much.
I'll look at it.